What is up, guys, and welcome back to the channel, guys. Had another special recommendation here with the channel, Not Just Bikes. Definitely one of my favorite channels, one of the channels I begin watching, to get an understanding of, other countries and how everything works. And we got crossing the street shouldn't be deadly, but it is. And this is a major thing just because, I know when it comes to school and stuff here in the United States and all those things, we have crossing guards just to help kids cross the street, and sometimes people don't even see them. I remember there was incidents where the crossing the guards got hit by cars and stuff. Let alone a kid getting hit, and even in college, like even as adults, we gotta be careful because I remember in college, a young lady got hit by a car crossing the street to where they had to change everything, put lights. So, because there wasn't no lights, they had little lights that the college student can press, but it would be hard to see from afar off. But they had to, they had to make some changes just because of that incident, because it could have been a deadly situation. You know what I'm saying? So, this is definitely gonna be interesting to see, and probably very informative because hey, it got to be better when it comes across being able people's safety to cross the street, especially with so much cars, so much traffic going on. But we finna check this out. Y'all hit that subscribe button. Hey, send me more video suggestions, and let's jump into it.
This video is sponsored by 80,000 Hours, the nonprofit organization that helps people find rewarding, meaningful careers completely free of charge. But more about that later. I grew up in a car-infested city called London, Ontario, Canada, though I've also lived in some nice places as well. But for most of my life, I lived in Canada or in the United States, and crossing the street was stressful sometimes. I now live in the Netherlands, a country with some of the safest streets in the world for people walking. Crossing the street here is not stressful at all.
That's a good thing.
I'm still amazed when I go back to visit family in Canada how unnecessarily difficult and dangerous it is to cross the street. It really shouldn't be, but it is. And most of that comes down to the way we design our streets.
I ain't gonna lie, he did it. I wish he with this one he should have showed New York, because oh my gosh, like with New York, because it's so busy there and people crossing the street, and you got cars like. Because usually when people can cross the street, there's still a turning signal for people to be able to turn, and those people will be like right there on you just to make sure they get that light, they pass that light. It's crazy.
To understand why it's safer and easier to cross the street in the Netherlands, it's useful to look at the alternatives first. This crossing probably looks pretty normal to anybody from the US or Canada, so let me explain some of the problems here. First, North American intersections are
right
pretty
there.
stupid. I mean,
Look at
simple.
there. He do got a video with it.
First,
this right
North
here.
American intersections are pretty
They
stupid.
be right there on you
simple.
trying to get past that
All
light.
traffic gets a green light in one direction, then the light turns red,
Dang.
and all traffic gets a green light in the other direction.
That's exactly how it is, too.
Sometimes there are some slight quirks like dedicated left turn arrows, but for the most part, this behavior describes the vast majority of intersections in the US and Canada. Traffic lights are designed and timed primarily for cars. The goal here is to keep motor vehicle traffic flowing as quickly as possible. There are often loops in the ground to detect cars, but there's no detection of people walking, and it's usually required to press a beg button like this one.
I see these buttons, I don't know, sometimes, because usually, I know what I've heard in Europe, usually once you press it, the light changes immediately, or or something like that. I couldn't remember if y'all had these in Europe, but I thought so. But usually it will detect if people come in, that light will change so people can cross and stuff. With this, it's still a while before you gotta wait. Like, it's pretty much normal, traffic switching times type of thing.
To cross the street. And depending how that signal is programmed, it may be required to press the beg button within a certain time window, or it won't work. For instance, from one of my early videos about traffic lights, this man pushed the button too late, so the signal changed to green without changing the walk indicator, meaning that these people need to cross illegally and scurry across the intersection like animals.
That's dangerous right there.
Here, I've pressed the button, and the light goes red for cars, but I'm still not allowed to go. In this case, there's a green left turn arrow or advanced green, which allows the left turn lane to clear, so I still need to wait. Before I start walking through, I have to look left because drivers are allowed to make right turns on
Yeah.
red lights. This is very dangerous to people walking, as it's very, very common for drivers not to stop when turning right on red, and their attention is almost exclusively on the flow of
And
traffic.
then you can't. It's hard. Like I ain't gonna lie. Sometimes, especially if you don't look both ways, you will miss the fact that somebody probably on your blind side, on the right side, and you can't see it. Like you definitely got to come to a complete stop and look both ways.
Coming from the left, which makes it harder to spot people crossing the street. One American study found a 69% increase in cars crashing into people walking when
Almost
right
got
turn on
him.
red was permitted. Right turns on red lights should never be permitted because it's dangerous and there are much better
Low
ways of
key.
speeding up car traffic, but it's still the norm almost everywhere in the US and Canada, with very few exceptions. Anyway, back to crossing the street. The crossing length is quite long because of the multiple wide traffic lanes. As I get past the middle of the intersection, I need to watch out for cars turning left or right through my crossing. And finally, I get to the other side. At a typical intersection in the US or Canada, the walk signal and the green light trigger at the same time.
See, this the dangerous
This means
part.
that anybody walking needs to watch out for cars turning right. In this case, all of the drivers decide to go first, even though they should have yielded to the person
Yep.
walking.
And they was zooming.
The solution to this is what's called a leading pedestrian indicator, which triggers the walk signal before the green light, allowing pedestrians to get a head start. These are quite common in the Netherlands, but they're starting to be implemented in some cities in North America as well. However, this is much less effective when right turn on red is allowed because drivers can still turn right anyway. And of course, you need to check for any drivers running a red light before crossing too, something particularly common in downtown Toronto.
I'll tell you, people be trying to beat those lights, man, especially if they're in a rush somewhere. Like, I always tell people, like, if you late to work and you still rushing, I mean, being 5, 10, or an hour late, you still late. Like, slow down.
A typical American walk signal will come on for only a few seconds, then turn to a flashing hand with a countdown timer showing how much time is left to cross the street. It's illegal to begin crossing if the countdown timer has started, and cities like Toronto are starting to enforce this rule at some intersections in order to speed up car traffic. This means that if you're not waiting at the intersection at just the right time to cross, you missed your chance and have to wait another light cycle. Crossing distances can be very, very long in North America as well,
Facts.
meaning that there's a very long time that a person walking is vulnerable in the intersection. This is particularly bad in many parts of the American South, like here in Las Vegas, because these places are designed almost exclusively to move as many cars as possible, not for the benefit of people outside of cars.
Would have thought walking
Las
across
Vegas
the
is
street
a
would be so
horrible place to
difficult.
walk, but lots of people need to do it, and these people are left dealing with whatever scraps are left over after traffic engineers are done designing exclusively for cars.
Let that car
And
wait.
even at traffic signals, there are times when pedestrian crossings aren't allowed in order to speed up car traffic. It's very telling that North American cities will spend millions of dollars on projects designed to speed up a driver's commute by a few minutes, but routinely make road changes that add to the time it takes to walk somewhere. This is also why you'll see another common problem crossing the street in the US and Canada. There are often very long distances between crossings because too many stoplights will slow down car traffic. For example, how are you supposed to get to this bus stop?
Ain't no crosswalk.
And when you do get off a bus in many suburban places in America, it's a long walk to the nearest intersection.
That's crazy.
And finally, there are slip lanes
Oh
like
my-
this one that allow drivers to turn right without a signal, and
These right here will get you, especially if you don't look at the lights and see, because some cars like about right here, most people will pull up all the way right here before they decide to stop and look. I'm guilty of a few, but like I ain't gonna lie, I'm guilty of a few, but in my hometown, like small town. In the city, you gotta make sure you stopping like right here, especially somewhere like Houston, cause it's filled with traffic. Like, yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. Most people they pull up all the way right here, and you know somebody that's coming probably not even looking, most likely. So, but this one right here is tricky. It's very tricky.
without slowing down. These are extremely dangerous for people outside of cars and should never be used where people are expected to cross. They really highlight that North American traffic engineers value the convenience of the people who drive more than the lives of the people who walk. In a few cities, these are being removed to increase safety. There used to be one here on this corner, but it was filled in with a small stormwater management garden a few years ago.
I see sometimes
Now,
with those, like sometimes with these, one thing you gotta take to consideration too. Most of them don't have, like, most times you see some of these. Not all of them have where like pedestrians can walk across and get there too. Some of them just there just to be there, but most times in bigger cities, like it's a lot of things going on around here, like different stores and all that. Like they're gonna have a place where pedestrians can walk here, go there, go over there, cross over here, all those different things. But it just depends on like if it's a major area where there's a bunch of stores and stuff.
people are expected to cross. They really highlight that North American traffic engineers value the convenience of the people who drive more than the lives of the people who walk. In a few cities, these are being removed to increase safety. There used to be one here on this corner, but it was filled in with a small stormwater management garden a few years ago. Now drivers need to make a much slower and safer sharp turn here. So with all that in mind, what is it like to cross the street in the Netherlands? This is Vibhoutstraat, which is one of the busier roads for car traffic in Amsterdam. In the 1960s, this intersection was a lot less friendly for people outside of cars, but thankfully the city has done a lot of work to repair it. What's really crazy to me though is that this road in Amsterdam is actually a little bit wider, sidewalk to sidewalk, than this road in Las Vegas. You can always determine the priorities of traffic engineers by the way they use the space available. But despite being very wide, this road is still very easy to cross. Look what happens when the walk signal turns on. People walking get a walk signal immediately and can cross to this area in the middle called a refuge island, even though cars are still able to drive in the lane that is farther away. This is the genius of Dutch traffic lights. Every direction is completely independent,
He pressed
so the
that button
behavior
and kept
can
walking.
change depending on what traffic is detected, making the system work better for everyone. I made an earlier video about how this works better for drivers, but it obviously works better for people walking too. With an intersection like this, you get to start crossing earlier, so there's less waiting at traffic lights. But it's safer too, because you only have to look in one direction at a time as you're crossing, and you're safe from traffic while on the refuge island. The island also forces drivers to take a wider turn, which means they approach the crossing perpendicularly and are more likely to see anyone who is crossing the street. Look what happens when I cross this time. I'm able to walk across as usual, but as I get to the other side, the traffic control system detects that there's no other vehicle traffic coming in the next lane, so the walk signal turns green for the first half of the crossing. By the time I make it across this part of the street, the car traffic is cleared in the next lane, and I'm able to keep crossing.
It looked like the system definitely worked good and faster in the Netherlands, it seemed.
Happened while the signal was still green in the perpendicular direction. This is the benefit of smart traffic lights and allowing people to cross the street halfway. Interestingly, many walk safety advocates have argued against having these two-phase crossings because North American traffic engineers tend to program the signals so that people walking need to cross in two phases.
I just think, like even with this situation right here, I know me when I travel for my basketball team and stuff. Like, I think where were we at? I think we were in Houston. No, we wasn't in Houston. We were somewhere else, probably somewhere in the Dallas area, and we had to cross the street. Mind you, like, say for instance, hotel right here, food restaurant over here, right there. We would have to go all the way down just to hit a crosswalk, make that trip longer, versus us. We see, oh, hey, no cars, just go across the street, you know. I mean, in some places, I don't know how much jaywalking, you know, all of what it means to jaywalk, all like in certain places. I know it is illegal in certain places, but I know it's not in all places because people just cross the street type of thing, and just being careful. I mean, I don't, you know, condone or recommend that anybody should cross the street with heavy traffic, but like I'm saying, like I remember we went to like a Whataburger, we crossed the street, boom. But the crosswalk thing would have been all the way down there, and we would have had to walk just to go, you know, from here to here. So it's like most people are just going to make that cross without even going to the crosswalk. At least here in the States, No, I have a few times.
making it take even longer to cross the street. The channel Ontario Traffic Man has
Oh
a
my
great
gosh.
video about this. It's definitely worth watching. I'd like to quickly mention the pedestrian scramble, where all walk indicators turn on at the same time so that people can
Oh,
cross in any direction they want, like at the famous Shibuya crossing in Japan,
that's a lot of
or
people.
this example on Oxford Street in London.
Okay, it don't even look like
There are a couple of these in Toronto.
it shouldn't even be cars here or here. At least here, it looks like a city center, like for just walking.
Or this example on Oxford Street in London. There are a couple of these in Toronto too, which is nice to see. Apparently, there are 2 of these in the Netherlands, though I've never been to them. But personally, I believe that if you have enough people walking to justify a scramble intersection, then that place should probably be pedestrianized. And what about beg buttons? Well, we have them here too, though they're usually only to turn on the audio signal for people with limited vision. But one big difference here is that they can be pressed at any time. Watch how the light immediately turns green for these people when they press the button. And at some intersections, there are radar detectors, which can automatically detect people approaching the crossing. These radar sensors are also sometimes used to detect if someone is taking a long time to cross the street and will keep the walk signal on longer or turn it off if no one else is crossing. Lane widths are much narrower in the Netherlands than in the US or Canada, so the crossing distance is shorter even if there are the same number of lanes.
They're like 2
For
seconds
roads within cities, the Netherlands has the narrowest lanes in the world, some as narrow as 2.7 meters. While city roads and stroads in North America are anywhere from 3.3 to 3.6 meters wide.
Long walk.
That's wider than highway lanes here in the Netherlands, which is part of what makes American stroads so dangerous. They're designed like highways. Some cities in North America are starting to purposefully narrow their streets, especially at crossings, which really should be done more often. Here's another small detail that makes a big difference. Here in the Netherlands, the traffic light for cars is on the near side of the intersection. This means that in order to see the traffic light, a driver needs to stop before the zebra crossing. But in North America, the traffic light is on the far side of the intersection, and this makes a huge difference, because it means that a driver can drive into the zebra crossing and still see the traffic light on the other side.
Sometimes the little zebra crossing, sometimes they be so far up, sometimes the line and these 2 lines, they be so far up that you have to pull almost in the middle of the road just to see cars coming, because sometimes it can be a blind spot right here depending on where you are. It's definitely different. There's a few times, because of course, usually even at a stop sign, you stop behind the stop sign, make sure you're behind the sign, make sure you're behind the line. Once you stop, you still gotta pull up to see if cars are coming. Like it's a mess down.
Results in this very common situation of a driver blocking the zebra crossing. Now, what about minor junctions, those that don't have a traffic signal? Here is a typical minor junction, like you'll find all over Canada and the US, and there will almost always be a stop sign. I made another video about the problems with stop signs, so I won't cover that here.
I've seen that one.
I'm just glad I live in a country that doesn't use stop signs unless absolutely necessary. Anyway, as you approach a junction like this, the sidewalk ends, then you need to step down to the level of the road to cross the street, and then go back up to the sidewalk on the other side. It is very clear that you are crossing a space meant for cars, and this design really reinforces the idea that it's the responsibility of the person walking to be careful
So you
when
can't
crossing
even
the
stop
street.
back there at all. You can't
And
see
since
nothing.
you need to go down to the level of the road in order to cross, there need to be ramps for people in wheelchairs. And these ramps can get clogged with water and debris. Drivers are supposed to come to a complete stop at this white line before the crossing, but very few people actually do this. In particular, drivers turning right often turn without stopping at all while only looking left for oncoming traffic. This is clearly a car-first approach, designed to allow drivers to turn as quickly as possible rather than for the safety of people walking. Now look at how this kind of minor junction is designed in the Netherlands, with a continuous sidewalk. In this design, the sidewalk continues through the intersection without dropping down, making it very clear that this is a space for people walking. Drivers have to go up a ramp to get to the junction, and this means that a car is
Yeah.
guaranteed to slow down before the crossing
Gotta
because
slow down.
physics works better than science.
Gotta slow down with that.
Streets in older neighborhoods that haven't been updated yet still have the old design that looks a lot like North America. But continuous sidewalks are now proven to be safer, so this has become the new standard across the country. And they're being built in many other cities in Europe as well. I have a full video about continuous sidewalks if you'd like to learn more about them. But since making that video, I've heard from so many people with physical disabilities who tell me how much they prefer this kind of crossing.
It's
People who are
safer.
blind or partially sighted find it much easier to cross as there are no tripping
Easier and
hazards.
safer.
And people in wheelchairs are very happy not to have to go down and up ramps to get across the street.
That's good.
These really are a vastly superior design and should be implemented
See,
everywhere.
designs benefiting everybody, you know?
Ironically, North America does have this kind of design along almost any stroke with a sidewalk, but only at the entrances to businesses. But this implementation is much worse. The ramp is very gradual and cuts into the sidewalk space, making it much easier for drivers to drive quickly over it. As usual, North American traffic engineers prioritize driver speed and convenience over the safety of people walking.
I feel like they just don't expect a lot of people to walk. To be
At small
honest.
four-way intersections, the entire
they
area
expect
is
everybody to
raised
have a
up to
car.
sidewalk level. This makes it much more convenient for people walking, but it also acts like a big speed bump, making it difficult for drivers to go too quickly through the intersection. And there are roundabouts. The remarkable design of a Dutch roundabout deserves its own
Oh.
video someday, but what's important is that it's designed to make people walking or cycling much more visible to drivers. Of course, if
Dang,
you
that
find
would've been
yourself
tough
wanting
to
to cross
see.
the street in the Netherlands, there's another option. You can just cross the street wherever you want to, which is not an option in most of the US because of decades of automobile
Yup.
industry propaganda.
You have to run across
This is
the
a
street.
famous video of Market Street in San Francisco, taken from the front of a trolley in 1906. You can see that automobiles were already a common sight, but there was also a lot of public
That is
transit, people
wild.
walking, and some people on bicycles too. This looks chaotic, but at slow speeds, mixed traffic generally works pretty well.
I couldn't imagine doing this. This is wild. I think sometimes if you use to argue like stop signs and street lights man, this is a good example to show people because I didn't know you can just freely just be in the road, middle of the road like this. Cars, bikes, people walking, buses,
A lot of
trains,
public
whatever.
transit, people walking,
That
and
is
some people on
wild. I never
bicycles
knew
too.
that.
This looks chaotic, but at slow speeds, mixed generally works pretty well.
That had to be a wild
Unfortunately, cars became heavier and a lot faster. For example, the Ford Model T, released in 1908, had a top speed of over 70 kilometers per hour. By the 1920s, the general public hated cars and wanted to have speed governors installed on them for use within
Dang.
cities. Cities also introduced high fines and penalties for dangerous driving.
time. Dang.
And when all this blowback resulted in a drop in car sales of 12% in 1924, the automobile industry started to get worried. So they invented a new term, jaywalking, literally shaming people for crossing the street anywhere
Wow,
except at
that's where it
designated
came
crossings. Now, I'm not going to go into the history of jaywalking. You can read the links in the description if you want. But what's important here is that the automobile industry flipped the conversation. Instead of drivers being held
Dang.
accountable for killing people, the burden of responsibility was now on the person crossing the street.
Agenda. They were trying to push the narrative of we need cars and we need lots of them. So stop walking and get a car.
Even though it was the drivers who were making the streets dangerous in the first place. To be clear, jaywalking is not and was never about safety. Safety could have been achieved with speed governors.
Mhm.
It was always about getting people out of the way of cars so that those cars could drive faster.
Crazy. And it looked like they in traffic. They
And
ain't
this was a
going
major
nowhere.
change in the way Americans approach road fatalities and crossing the street in general that persists even today. Here's what Market Street in San Francisco looked like in the 1960s, with people confined to cross only at designated areas. This is a major difference in a fairly short period of time. Incidentally, in
Wow.
2020, San Francisco banned all private vehicles from Market Street to make it more efficient for people traveling by public transit and bicycle. Unfortunately, people aren't allowed to cross the street wherever they want yet,
Dang,
so there's still some work to
that
be done
sucks.
to repair it. Jaywalking is a very American concept. Outside of the United States, there aren't a lot of places that
Say,
make it
I thought
illegal to cross
jaywalking was everywhere. That's crazy. I thought everywhere, like around the world, you couldn't jaywalk.
mid-block, and there are even fewer places where these laws are actually enforced. For example, in Ontario, Canada, there is no law at all against crossing the street mid-block, so what I'm doing right here in Toronto is completely
Hmm.
legal. Though, because of American cultural influence in Canada, most people don't know this, and I've been literally threatened by ignorant drivers for crossing the street like this on multiple occasions.
Crazy. People try to hit you on purpose too.
Here in the Netherlands, there used to be a law that stated that you couldn't cross the street within 30 meters of a zebra crossing, but that law was repealed in 1995. Now the Dutch can cross wherever they damn well please because, unlike America, this is the land of
Come
freedom.
on now, speak, keep speaking.
What most people don't know is that it hasn't always been this way in the Netherlands. If you had done this comparison in the 1960s or 1970s, there wouldn't have been much difference between Dutch and American cities. Most of these changes only happened since the 1990s when the Dutch developed what they call sustainable traffic safety, a system that focuses on making
That's
the
real
streets
good.
fundamentally safer by fixing the infrastructure itself, rather than the lazy approach of education campaigns,
Be nice, look
pedestrian
quiet.
victim blaming, or asking drivers really nicely if they could please maybe consider not driving so dangerously. This
That's
difference
crazy.
becomes very clear when you look at
You
the
shouldn't have
approach
to
to
ask them, please. You should already have something set in stone for 'em.
infrastructure. Here in the Netherlands, the emphasis is on using infrastructure to appropriately slow cars, so that it is very difficult for drivers to drive quickly through crossings. Whereas in the US and Canada, there's this outdated belief that crashes between cars and people are due to the people not being visible enough. There's almost
Whatever
no
they want people to
acknowledgement that
do.
driver attention and driver speed are the major contributing factors to serious crashes, because the overwhelming design goal for North American streets is to keep cars moving as quickly as possible. Zebra crossings in North America are really, really dangerous because you usually have to cross multiple lanes of
Yep.
high-speed traffic and hope that every driver
And
stops.
to think these, I mean, I go by miles per hour. That's I don't know. I still, learning the kilometers, but be like 75 miles per hour. So people are basically, people going over that. They're going about 10, 20 over that. So people are going almost 100 miles per hour, and you trying to cross the street. So, and it ain't so easy to come to a stop when you're going 80 to 100 miles per hour at all.
Oh, Jesus.
Look at that.
But
Like,
since no traffic engineer is willing to slow down the cars, the
them
design
slowing
stays
down
the
or
same,
stopping.
and the focus is
See how
only
they slow down and stop? Somebody who's not paying attention could have, boom, hit them in the back.
on making people walking more visible. So we get designs like this.
Oh, yeah.
These are technically called ped crossovers, but almost everyone in Canada will call this a crosswalk. You'll find them between signalized intersections, though usually only in urban areas.
I had to get these.
When
at
you
my
want to
college.
cross the street, you press this button, and it makes these yellow lights flash. Then drivers are supposed to yield to pedestrians. These are an improvement to regular zebra crossings, but there are still several issues. For example, drivers don't have to stop when the lights are on, they just need to yield. So there are many times that a driver doesn't notice or doesn't care that a person is crossing. And since crosswalks often span multiple lanes, you need to ensure that both drivers notice that you're crossing and
Boy,
that
you got
both
to be
drivers
very
stop.
careful.
And there's no difference in
Oh.
road design, which means that a driver who isn't paying attention will just drive
Road
right
lane
through.
you walk in.
And of course, they're still built on the myth that the reason people get hit by cars is because they're
that.
not visible enough. I was hit by a car at this crosswalk by a distracted driver back in 2014.
Dang.
Thankfully, I escaped with minor injuries, but only because his windows were open and he could hear me scream at him to stop.
That's
The
crazy.
Netherlands also has mid-block zebra crossings as well, but they're designed to be much safer. In most cases, these will have some kind of speed hump or raised crossing that forces a driver to pay attention. And there
Them
will
things will definitely mess up your car if you go too fast on them.
always be only one lane for car traffic in each direction at a crossing.
Be flying like Mission
In this
Impossible.
example, the street narrows physically, these lines make the street look more narrow visually, and finally, the crossing itself is raised up like a speed bump. This allows people to cross the street without any drop down to road level and with multiple refuge islands in between. In North America, this would all be one unprotected zebra crossing spanning multiple lanes of car traffic. On roads with higher vehicle speeds, there is a speed bump before the crossing so that drivers must slow down before reaching the crossing. All of these things make crossings like this much safer because, again, physics works better than science. And flashing lights, too. In the US, they have something even more insane and over-engineered. The hawk signal.
I think I've seen it.
These monstrosities typically cost over $100,000 and have this bizarre configuration of lights.
Yeah.
Now, logically, it would make more sense to just install a regular traffic light, but since this is America, the hawk crossing is designed to allow a person to cross the street while inconveniencing drivers as little as possible.
They had to put this. They had to put these where the young lady at my school got hit. They had to install. They had to do it quickly too, cause like it was that bad, cause the lights they did have, nobody can really see them. Like even when I was driving, like you really had to know that those lights were there all the time. So just think, if somebody coming in new to the city, new to the town, they not gonna know those lights. This is more visible, but they had to put them in just because people were getting hit by cars.
When you press the button at a hawk crossing, you have to wait. The lights will flash in this pattern, and once the walk signal comes on, you can start crossing the street.
Look how long of a walk that is.
The lights will flash red after a few seconds, and drivers are now allowed to start driving if their lane is clear. Of course, a hawk crossing still depends on what American traffic engineers call driver compliance, which is normally good, but one Delaware study found that at some hawk crossings, more than 41% of motorists were observed disregarding the red signal. And since hawk signals are almost always used over multi-lane stroads with no refuge island, you need to make sure that there's, quote, driver compliance for every single one of those 4 to 6 lanes of traffic you're crossing. In the end, all of this over-engineered nonsense is here because American traffic engineers can't do what has been proven over and over again to actually improve safety for people walking: slowing the cars. It's at this point that some Americans will flippantly say that what we really need is pedestrian bridges. That way, people walking can cross the street without ever having to interact with cars at all. But this solution is almost always proposed by the people who drive.
So you're gonna make a bridge everywhere you go, like just to cross the street to go to certain places? That sounds like too much work. Where you can just get cars to slow down. A lot of work and money.
Not the people who walk. These crossings are miserable, and they make what should be a short trip across the street into a long ordeal. There are always these ramps, so the distance you have to walk is significantly longer, and if you think it sucks to walk up one of these things, it's even worse to take a wheelchair up them.
Crazy.
In my video collaboration with Shifter last year, he needed to cross a very wide stroad in Calgary and had to take this pedestrian bridge, which was more like a concrete ditch in the sky. Though the people on the ramp on the other side were nice enough to offer him some of their crack cocaine.
Hey, buddy, want a hoot?
No, I'm good, thanks. They
Canadians
just chilling
so
right
friendly.
there. That's crazy.
Let's be very clear here. Approximately 0% of people prefer to walk out of their way along a long, filthy concrete trench with an elevation of several meters rather than, just walk along the ground to where they're going. These bridges are built for exactly one reason, so that people walking do not interfere with the flow of cars. These are not built for the benefit of people walking.
At all.
This is car infrastructure masquerading as pedestrian infrastructure. The only pedestrian bridges that should exist are those that keep pedestrians at ground level, like this one.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
But I've saved the best for last, because there's an American solution to road safety that can only be described as batshit crazy: pedestrian crossing flags. At a growing number of zebra crossings in America, you'll find a container of flags like this.
I ain't never seen these. And knowing how some people are, somebody goes steal these and try to sell them. Reselling them.
Road. If you want to cross the street, you're supposed to take a flag.
Crazy.
Check that it's safe to cross. Hold the flag out in front of you as you cross the street. hope that nobody decides to run you over that day, and then put it in the
What
holder
if
on the
somebody
other side.
colorblind?
Of course, this is absolutely ridiculous and an insult to people walking, so most people don't bother using them. Except this dude. Bravo, sir. But if people do use them, the utterly predictable happens. All the flags end up on only one side of the street. And then a driver cuts you off as you're crossing.
Yeah.
Obviously, these women weren't visible enough without their flag to be
And then
extra safe.
if something would have happened, they would have blamed, well, you didn't use the flag. It's like, well, all the flags are on the other side. It's not enough flags out here y'all have.
You can have a hot crossing
Obviously.
and pedestrian flags, because clearly the only problem on this high-speed strode is that people walking aren't visible enough.
That's crazy.
But the purpose of a crossing flag is not actually to make it safer to cross the strode. It's to make it your fault if you're hit by a car while not waving a flag in front of you like an imbecile.
I surrender.
And of course, they still don't do anything to actually slow down drivers.
That's wild.
We know a lot more about road safety than we did in the 1920s, or even the 1960s. And there have been decades of studies that show how to make the roads safer to cross. It's not education campaigns, it's not flashy signs, and it's definitely not these flags. There have been many cities that have successfully implemented infrastructure changes based on modern road safety research, such as Oslo, which had 0 pedestrian fatalities in 2019.
That's real
But
good.
the US and Canada refuse to properly implement these solutions because the research says that motor vehicle speeds need to be lower sometimes, and that's a step too far for most
Yeah, I don't
American
want
cities.
that.
In 2020, there were 41 people on the street who were killed by cars in the Netherlands. But the province of Ontario, Canada, which has a similar but smaller population, had 114 people killed by cars in the same year. That is a massive
Very.
difference. But it's even worse when you consider that a lot fewer people walk in Ontario because most Ontario cities look like this. It's miserable to walk
Yeah.
there. An even worse example is Phoenix, Arizona, which is probably the most dangerous city for people walking in the
Very.
entire
I ain't never
developed world.
seen that type of
They
stuff.
had 69 people killed while walking in 2020 and 97 people killed in 2021,
Dang.
despite having a population of only 1.6 million people, less than 1/10 that of the Netherlands.
That's
And
wild.
an even lower percentage of people walk in Phoenix because it is basically the textbook definition of a car-infested wasteland. So these numbers are way worse than they look.
Dang.
This is not a trivial difference. The streets and roads in the Netherlands are orders of magnitude safer for people walking. But what the stats don't show you is that it also feels safer to walk here too. And that makes a huge
Right.
difference. While I'm walking here, I'm not worried that someone is going to speed up to pass me in a crosswalk. I'm not concerned about someone smashing into me turning right at a red light while only looking left. I don't have to think about whether or not the driver will stop at the stop sign when I'm
Got
crossing. I just cross the street, and I know that the infrastructure
Be
will
about
keep
your
me
business,
protected.
you know?
It's really hard to convey just how much better this is for me and my family, and how much lower my stress levels are when I'm out walking
I
on the
can
street.
bet.
And of course, I'm also not constantly worrying about my kids crossing the street either. All of this helps to contribute to the better quality of life we enjoy here in the Netherlands, better than any place I've ever lived in the United States or Canada, by far.
Wow.
This is the difference that good quality road infrastructure makes.
This was good.
We really need more people working to make the world a better place. You spend a lot of your life at work, 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year for 40 years. That's 80,000 hours. That's a lot of time, and it
Whole
means
lot.
that your career is probably your biggest opportunity to make a positive impact on the world. But how do you actually manage to achieve a high impact and fulfilling career? Well, if you want quality, impartial advice based on evidence and careful research, completely free, check out 80,000 Hours. 80,000 Hours is a nonprofit that helps people have a positive impact with their career. They provide research and
Oh,
support
wow.
to help you find a career tackling one of the world's most pressing problems, and it's all completely free.
That's pretty cool.
If you're starting out with your career and not sure what to do, looking to make a change in direction mid-career, or even just want to help solve pressing global problems from your current job, they can help. If this sounds good to you, then I recommend checking them out at 80000hours.org slash
Might have
not
to
just
do that.
bikes or by clicking the link in the description. There, you can sign up to their newsletter for a free copy of their in-depth career guide. They also have a podcast
Oh,
featuring in-depth conversations with experts tackling important global problems. I was particularly interested in the discussion with Professor Stuart Russell about why our approach to artificial intelligence is broken and how to fix it, because there's so much talk about fixing cities with AI these days, with some of those fixes causing more harm than good.
dang.
On the 80,000 Hours website, you'll also find a job board, career guides, and lots of information about getting a career that makes a difference. And
I'm
to
gonna
be
be look them
clear,
up.
80,000 Hours is a nonprofit organization, and they're completely funded by philanthropic donations. Their only goal is to help you find a fulfilling, high-impact
That's
career.
awesome.
So check them out now at 80,000hours.org slash notjustbikes.
Wow,
I'd
thanks,
also like
not
to
just
thank my
bikes.
supporters on Patreon who pay me to cross the street, repeatedly, while the people in the cafe nearby look at me like I'm crazy. If you'd like to support the channel, visit
Let me see.
patreon.com.
I think because I know I was subscribed on my other channels. Yep, I'm still No, this was good. This was good. Definitely necessary. Who would have thought crossing the street would be so dangerous, and so deadly? But it is. But it is. People just minding their business, going about their day, just trying to, probably get something to eat, maybe walking to work, and boom, somebody not paying attention hit you, or somebody rushing, trying to get to work, and trying to force that right turn and stuff. But it is definitely different. Definitely gotta some things gotta change, especially when it comes to these roads. But like I said, the Netherlands gotta figure out. So even if you want to try to speed up on that crosswalk, you can't, cause 10 times out of 10 you gonna damage your car. And I know nobody want to fix they spend all that money like making repairs and stuff on cars. But this was good. Definitely appreciate the recommendation. Y'all let me know what y'all think. Crossing the street. It may sound like a crazy topic to some, but it's definitely an important topic that nobody talks about because it's not popular. But it is a thing that happens so frequently, at least here in the States. It can be very deadly. It can be very dangerous. So, but appreciate you guys. Y'all make sure y'all hit that subscribe button. Hey, send me some more video suggestions. That's all I have. Y'all be blessed, be the best, and be you. I'm out.